The following is a production of Professor Robert Barnwell. Each episode includes insights provided by the chairman, CEOs, and CFOs of the world's most successful corporations, as well as thought leaders from premier business schools and international consultancies. If you and your team would like more information on corporate leadership and strategic management, or would like to learn more about Professor Barnwell, his research, and how he may be able to assist your company, please visit Professor Barnwell's website at robertgbarnwell.com.
Hello, and welcome to CFO Talk Radio. I'm your host, Robert Barnwell. During the last episode, we spoke with Steve Miller, the national leader of KPMG's Integration and Separation Services practice, about the challenges of merger integration. This marked the second episode in a special four-part series featuring several senior professionals from KPMG. This is episode 14, and we'll be speaking with Don Malliard. Don, a partner with KPMG and the U.S. leader of KPMG's Financial Management Advisory Group, has agreed to join us today to speak about a subject that has been on many of our minds for the past several years and will likely remain at or near the top of our agendas for several years to come: corporate cost-cutting strategies. Don, welcome to CFO Talk Radio.
Thanks, Robert. I'm glad to be here. I appreciate you having me on.
You know, as we exit and move beyond the Great Recession of 2007 through 2011, I think many companies and their senior executives are really anxious to begin thinking of growth and expansion again. However, I think that they'll likely want to continue to run lean and maintain a degree of financial and operational flexibility throughout the foreseeable future. As you look over the past few years, how would you rate the ability of large cap companies in North America and Western Europe, perhaps in particular, in terms of their ability to cost cut?
Well, I think obviously that'll vary by company, but generally speaking, I think large companies were able to cut costs quite effectively this time around. I think the Great Recession forced companies' hands, and I think we saw changes that indicate the costs were truly sustainable. For example, I recently saw a statistic that said 80% of the Fortune 1,000 have moved to some type of a shared services environment or structure, and as we know, many have moved to outsourcing models. And so these are examples of structural change that indicate that the costs will be that were taken out of the business will be sustainable. We're also seeing an uptick in leveraging technology to help take costs out of the business. We've seen large multinationals that may have grown through acquisition consolidate their ERP systems. We've seen EPM technologies that help streamline the close process, the planning process, and the reporting process. And these two initiatives free up a lot of time and take costs out of the business and inefficiency out of the process, and will help sustain the cost takeout. The latest trend we're seeing is also in finance governance technologies. These technologies help automate things like account reconciliations and the journal entry process. So when you take all these things together, I think you're going to see that these are sustainable costs that have been taken out of the business, and we're not going to see it as a one-time cost.
Interesting. Not long ago, we spoke with Paul Leinwand of Bain & Company on our companion program, CEO Talk Radio. And while we didn't have the opportunity to go in depth with Paul about his studies into cost cutting, I do know that he's been very critical of companies forcing down arbitrary percentages in terms of department, divisional, business, and corporate level cost cuts. Instead, he had mentioned that in his experience, many companies have been able to quickly and selectively cut costs while maintaining considerable competitive strength. Has this been your experience as well? And if so, how would you recommend that senior teams go about this more strategic approach to cost cutting?
Well, I'd have to agree with Paul. I believe top-down cost-cutting goals can lead to unintended efficiencies. When I've seen those happen in the past, you get some business units that may be given goals that are easily achievable, and that can result in inefficiencies staying in the business. Others may be so draconian that they cut into the bone and negatively impact performance. I believe the key to strategic cost cutting is looking for the big rocks. In other words, what are the things we can do structurally that will have a true impact on our costs? Finance executives need to look at costs across whole processes, not just within the finance function. It ultimately means rethinking the entire business model around lower costs, possibly taking advantage of taking layers out of the organization. As mentioned earlier, shared services and outsourcing are good examples of this. Consolidation of operations is another. I think these are strategic decisions that will drive costs out and will sustain the cost takeout. The focus should be on creating leaner, more efficient organization with cost reduction as the consequence, not necessarily just the target. I think another trend we're seeing and a real key is in information. The better a company's information, the better the decision-making process can be. My research indicates that these companies will typically have higher compound annual growth rates, higher revenue, and higher return on invested capital because they're being strategic in their cost cutting and in their capital investment. That's why we're seeing more finance executives interested in investing or in revamping in their business intelligence. The key to success here is to prioritize the data quality over the quantity. In other words, having access to the right metrics for your business in a timely manner. This may seem simple, but many companies have had a great deal of difficulty turning the mounds of data that they have into the right information to run the business. And while cost cutting or cash management or even business intelligence may lie within the finance department's domain, it's important for everyone in the organization to play a role in making these changes and programs successful. Managers need to take responsibility for change beyond their own department, and employees need to change behaviors that are not supporting the business strategy. Addressing people and change management issues as part of the rollout of any new initiative will increase the likelihood that change will be sustainable.
All right. Well, you mentioned earlier that you thought that a lot of the cost cutting that we experienced through the Great Recession, unlike previous periods, is actually sustainable. And actually, I'd like to talk about that if we could. If we take a look at the types of cost cutting completed during past downturns, and then compare or contrast that to the type of attention to cost and efficiencies that'll ultimately be demanded in a more stable or prosperous period, it seems to me that a lot of companies, when they're confronted with a period that such as the one that we just went through, they're very reactionary in terms of their cost-cutting programs. They say, look, this is the new environment, and we've got to shrink our expenses and our costs, as well as liabilities to reflect this new reality, rather than taking the strategic view that we just talked about. So I guess my question would be, shouldn't the pursuit of efficiency be a longer-term and ongoing effort on behalf of the corporation, rather than reactionary and one-off?
Robert, you're absolutely right. I mean, cost-cutting tends to be reactionary as opposed to systemic. The old saying, rising tide floats all boats is very true. When times are good and growth is easily attained, it's easy for companies to focus on the growth initiative and let inefficiencies creep into the system. Additionally, growth often causes senior leadership to lose the bully pulpit for cost control and continuous improvement. However, I'm a firm believer that efficiency should be built in as a goal, and leaders should have accountability for results as part of their compensation package. If a company does not have this culture of continuous improvement, it manifests itself in large layoffs when the economy turns down. I think companies, at least for now, are realizing that. When KPMG surveyed U.S. finance executives late last year, 80% that said that reducing their company's overall cost structure was an opportunity for them to help contribute to the company's performance. What this says to me is that cost cutting is still a priority, even in a stronger economy.
All right, well, let's move from the macro to the more micro. Again, from my perspective, I like to use the 80-20 rule in terms of focusing my attention on a variety of issues, including cost cutting. And then, rather than waste my time trying to negotiate down the cost of paper clips, I'd prefer to spend my time whittling away at some of the larger cost or expense line items on my income statement. And in the majority of cases, I think what we're talking about here are items that comprise cost of goods sold, labor, and benefits. Is this the right approach, and have I kind of singled out some of the big ticket areas on which we should be concentrating?
Absolutely, you have. Well-informed companies understand their major areas of cost, and these are the areas that must be focused on when looking to take costs out of the business. The problem is, these are often the hardest areas for companies to focus on given the impact to suppliers and employees. The decisions involving these areas are extremely sensitive and difficult to make, which often causes companies to focus on the easier decisions that result in less savings and usually one-time savings, as opposed to the sustainable cost takeout that we've been discussing today. I'm into sayings, I guess, today, but the old saying of pay me now or pay me later definitely applies here. Because if you don't continually address and manage costs, when the economy does turn or your competition starts to take advantage of these cost savings opportunities, then you'll be forced to address these issues in a dramatic fashion and often in a very tight time frame, which causes the reactionary decisions as opposed to the strategic decisions. So if companies haven't already taken a hard look at how their operations, their supply chain, technology, and people align to support their business strategy, now is an ideal time to consider doing an assessment of those and consider making changes.
Well, if I could, I'd like to share with you an observation I've seen with a number of companies, including many of my own clients. And my experience has been primarily with companies that are undergoing significant strategic, operational, and financial change. And for many of these companies, if not most, layoffs have really been a big component of their cost-cutting activities. And, for the record, I've got no illusion that layoffs aren't a powerful and often necessary tool for cost-cutting. I'm certainly no Pollyanna. But what I've seen quite a bit is companies that lay off employees end up spending quite a bit of money in terms of severance and legal costs and human resource consulting advisory. And these costs typically exceed the short-term gain from the savings related to the layoffs. And then within a year or two, as the company's performance improves, maybe their market improves, the size of the workforce at the company actually grows to equal, if not exceed, the workforce that they had pre-layoff. So, and right now we haven't even touched upon the impact of layoffs with regard to the retention of the remaining and talented employees. What are your experience with layoffs or reductions in force, and what are your thoughts that you may share with companies and their executives to help them make better decisions and better manage this process when it's inevitable?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I have a firm belief that layoffs are often a result of companies not continually driving efficiencies and then having to quickly react to changes in the economy, the market, or their competition in their particular industry. Therefore, I'd say my advice to executives is pretty straightforward. First, I think you have to instill a culture of continuous improvement. This will keep unnecessary costs from creeping into the system that you'll then have to later react to. Second, I think you have to have your processes well documented and common across the enterprise. You see a lot of inefficiencies with different processes and different technologies supporting what should be a common process across the company. Second, I think you have to have your people be cross-trained. Often we see companies that have had mass layoffs find that much of their institutional knowledge walks out the door when those people leave. So companies that then have to hire these resources back as internal consultants, reducing the impact of the initial layoff and compounding, the costs of doing so that you talked about earlier from a legal and HR perspective and severance. So if your processes are well documented and common and your people are trained to do several jobs, then the likelihood of your retained resources being able to perform the additional work increases. Third, I think you have to look at your service delivery model and identify models that allow for flexibility of the workforce based on volume or circumstance. So outsourcing is a prime example. Assuming you've got a relationship with the outsourcer that allows you to increase or decrease your workflow or your workforce as needed based on the economic situation. Finally, I believe you have to have a culture of leveraging data into business insights. These insights can help manage suppliers and supplier costs, customer or product line profitability, measure and manage efficiencies. I think these insights can help companies prosper even in times of market instability and hopefully avoid the layoffs altogether. However, some companies did use layoffs as a way to refocus and restructure their organization to address a new economy and marketplace. The difference here was that these layoffs were strategic versus reactive. In fact, we're seeing strong demand in talent development and organizational design services now that companies are realizing that they need to focus on doing business more efficiently and smarter. It's about recruiting and nurturing the best people who possess the skills that your business will need in the future, who often have different skills than the people that were let go. And some companies are also realizing that their organizational structure needs to be realigned to support their business. So, I think if the layoffs were used strategically, then I think there is potentially some benefit to that. If you're changing your service delivery model to meet the business needs and your business objectives. But I think again, if it was in a reactionary format, the negative far outweighs the positive.
Right. Well, you mentioned several things that I'd kind of like to explore a little bit. And so before we let you go, what other parting thoughts, that you'd like to share with CFOs and their corporate finance teams in terms of their roles and responsibilities with regard to driving long-term and ongoing cost efficiencies?
Well, I think as we transition from the Great Recession, and hopefully we're transitioning out of it, I think the role of finance really needs to change from more of the bookkeeper and report generator to one of a strategic business partner. The CFO and the finance organization have historically been the steward of the company's hard assets and capital. But I believe the CFO now needs to be the steward of the soft assets, and to me, those assets are the data. The finance function needs to take the lead in managing the data that's available and turning it into meaningful business analytics. The insight from this allows for continuous efficiency, I believe the best and proper use of capital, and improved scenario analysis so that the enterprise can have business plans based on different scenarios that may occur. Research would indicate that enterprises that do this well outperform their peers across every financial metric, top and bottom lines, balance sheet cash flow, and operational efficiency. I think with this expanded role and responsibilities, CFOs and finance leaders also need to develop strong relationships with others in the organization, such as IT, HR, and sales. As discussed earlier, everyone in the organization has a role in business improvement, and everyone should be working together towards the same goal and not in silos. But I think finance needs to be the leader and the driving force that brings everyone together and helps drive these programs and really make this value integrator concept sustainable.
I can listen to the listeners now, all shaking their head in unison. I think they're all on the same page with you in terms of their hopes and desires. I know a lot of the CFOs and corporate finance team members that we speak with, truly want to take this more strategic role on the executive team, and a lot of them, are spending undue amounts of times working on annual budgets, updating budgeting processes. And in a time of really, it's difficult to really judge, what your costs are going to be from one week to the next. And I think you touched upon something that many finance professionals should think about, and that is the automation and the systems related to the finance function, so people can spend more time on many of these activities that you just outlined.
Yeah, there used to be the business case, before the Great Recession to do some of this automation was just so people could go home on the weekends. The more manual the process was, the more people had to work late, particularly during the close and then during the budget cycles. But now it's just to me it's a cost of entry, and you have to have an automated reporting system, and then that helps really allow you to do the analysis, which is what you're really paying those finance folks for. You're not paying them to manipulate Excel spreadsheets. You're paying them to look at the data that's been collected and draw some conclusions. And the same with budgeting. I think we may one day see just kind of the end of the whole budgeting process and really move more to the rolling forecast. I think I saw that in CFO magazine, a couple of weeks ago, but we've been preaching that to our clients for quite some time. And again, there's lots of tools out there that can help automate that. And again, I want to focus on automating the things that can be automating and letting the people that we're hiring really do the analysis, because I think this whole turning data into meaningful information is going to be critical to helping companies thrive as we come out of the recession.
Terrific suggestions and thoughts. Today we've been talking with Don Malliard, a partner with KPMG Advisory and the U.S. leader of KPMG's Financial Management Advisory Group. Don, it's really been terrific having you on the program, and I sincerely hope that you'll agree to join us again sometime soon.
Thanks very much, Robert. I enjoyed speaking with you, and I'd be happy to come back if you so desire.
That was Don Malliard, a partner with KPMG and the U.S. leader of KPMG's Financial Management Advisory Group, speaking with us about corporate cost-cutting strategies. Please join us for our next episode when we bring you the concluding episode of a 4-part series featuring several senior professionals from KPMG. During this 4th and final installment, we'll be speaking with 2 KPMG professionals in a unique roundtable discussion. The discussion features previous guest Steve Miller, the national leader of KPMG's Integration and Separation Services practice, and John McPhee, a partner in KPMG Advisory's Transaction Services and the leader of KPMG's Sell-Side Services. Steve and John will be joining us to discuss a particularly important and potentially powerful topic, divestitures. Until then, this is Robert Barnwell and CFO Talk Radio wishing you all the best.
We hope that you have enjoyed this episode and found the material of value. To download a transcript of this episode, receive a free subscription to the show, or to learn more about this subject, we encourage you to visit Professor Barnwell's website at robertgbarnwell.com to explore the many executive briefings, presentations, case studies, and other resources available for immediate download. This has been a production of Robert G. Barnwell. All rights reserved.